Land Use, Transportation, and Infrastructure Committee. It is Tuesday, November 12th. I am Councilman Chris Herndon. I represent District 8. And I'd first like to go around the table and have my colleagues introduce themselves.
Good morning, Kendra Black, District 4.
Morning, Jamie Torres, District 3.
Good morning, Candi Cde Baca, District 9.
Good morning, Amanda Sawyer, District 5.
Zach Rothmeyer, Legislative Analyst.
All right, no action items today, but we do have a presentation on our neighborhood planning initiative, and I'll allow Caryn and Cortland, you can introduce yourselves and you can take it away. Colleagues, if you want to get in the queue, let me know, and I'll make sure you can ask questions at the end.
Good afternoon. Well, thanks for your agenda time today for us to just give you an overview of the program, give you an update on where things are at, talk about some of the lessons we're learning just within the first phase, and answer any questions or identify some follow-up topics that you want to explore further. I didn't introduce myself, but you all know me, Caryn Champine, the Director of Planning Services. Also with me is Cortlan Hyser. He is the Supervisor within Neighborhood Planning. I want to recognize a few colleagues in the audience, too. First is Sarah Nermella. She is our new Neighborhood Planning Manager. This is her first day, so feel free to direct any of your hard questions to Sarah. She's ready for you. And then we also have Scott Robinson, Liz Weigel, and Eugene Howard, who are all project managers of active planning efforts and are just very interested in your insights and the conversation. So I'm really going to hand it over to Cortland to do the majority of the presentation, and happy to answer any questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So generally 3 items in today's presentation. We'll start with a few slides giving an overview of the Neighborhood Planning Initiative as a program. Get into some more details on schedule and current status of active plans that are in process right now. And then finish with some lessons learned and some ideas for improvement moving forward as we think ahead to future phases of Neighborhood Planning Initiative. So first, the program overview. We just have a handful of slides here. This is really just the basics on why do we plan, what do plans do. Really at the base level, the purpose of planning is to create a shared vision that addresses the needs and concerns of the community. So the plan should articulate what that future vision looks like. Plans inform how things should evolve for the benefit of the community. The idea is that you create the plan with the community, and their vision and ideas are reflected in it. So engage people in a dialogue about the future, work to define that vision, identify strategies to help achieve the vision, and then use the plan to inform decision-making from that point forward. This graphic represents the cycle. Now, this is a big, long-term cycle, but starting at the top, you have citywide plans and neighborhood plans. And that's where we collect all of this public input, create that vision, document the future, and the strategies for achieving it. Those things then inform regulations. The regulations that are in place should work towards achieving what the plan's goals are. Moving on from there, you get more specific into the permitting phase where folks present projects. They follow the rules and regulations. If they're following it, they get a permit for construction, and then you inspect what they're building to make sure that they did it in the way that the permit specifies. So over a long period of time, the cycle kind of repeats itself as you update your plans, then update your regulations to support those plans. That trickles into permitting and inspections later down the line. For citywide planning, this is where we set the broad policies and recommendations that apply everywhere, citywide. Now, most citywide plans focus on a single topic, right? You have the game plan focuses on parks and recreation facilities. Denver Moves, Peds and Trails focuses on facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists. Transit, self-explanatory. Comprehensive Plan and Blueprint Denver provide citywide guidance on planning specific matters and touch on more topics. But generally, it's true that most of your citywide plans are focused on a single topic and look at it citywide as a system. Neighborhood and small area plans are where you get into the details. Now, it's important to note that these apply only to the specific areas that are being planned, right? The neighborhood, corridor, transit area, what have you, that's within the planning boundaries. Now, a key advantage for this approach is that you can address many topics and show how all the systems interrelate at that local level. You can really take the detailed look at the parks recommendations from the game plan, look at the transit system recommendations from Denver Moves, see if these things are fitting together in a rational way, and make tweaks based on that analysis, cutting across different topics. These are adopted as supplements to the comprehensive plan, and they must be consistent with citywide plans. But at the same time, they are an opportunity to update those plans. So most specifically with Blueprint Denver, you have a future places map, which covers the entire city. 100% of the land is covered by that. Sometimes when you take a more detailed look at a specific area, you realize we need to change the strategy, move where the lines are. Different land use might be more appropriate based on some changed conditions since Blueprint Denver, any variety of reasons. It is an opportunity to update the mapping. It's important to note that your neighborhood or small area plans aren't intended to contradict citywide policy, but they're an opportunity to identify customized strategies for achieving those policies. And you can provide detailed guidance that's especially useful for rezonings or other very local specific policy decisions. One thing that's somewhat unique to neighborhood and small area plans is that this is where we recommend a lot of capital projects and facilities that might not otherwise be contemplated in some of your citywide plans. So examples of that might be new roads or bridges, facilities that don't exist. Very often it's in your small area plans where those are recommended or first thought of. And then also, of course, implementation is key, and the plans have a section identifying strategies for future implementation of identified projects. So a few years ago, before we started Neighborhood Planning Initiative, this was what the coverage looked like of current small area plans within Denver. A little less than 20% of the city was covered by a recent neighborhood plan, recent being less than 15 years old or newer than Blueprint Denver 2002. Looking forward to the next 15-year period, we wanted to be able to say that we covered 100% of the city over a 15-year time period instead of 20%. And so the Neighborhood Planning Initiative was created as a way to use resources more efficiently so that we could cover 100% of the city over the next 15-year period. This is accomplished by grouping neighborhoods together into larger areas instead of doing just one neighborhood at a time. Having multiple plans in process, we do 3 of those at a time. Standardizing the timeline for each plan so that they take no more than 2 years. Now, sometimes you may need to extend that period a little bit, which is the case with some of our current plans, and I'll get into that a bit later. But in general, the idea is to be able to complete these plans within 1.5 years to 2 years. The strategic plan for NPI standardizes the plan content so that there's a minimum amount of content that's prescribed to be included in every plan to provide some consistency from one plan to the next in terms of what's addressed. And then it's an ongoing or rolling process. So as you finish one of these plans, within a couple of months, be in a position to launch the next one. These are the 19 groupings of neighborhoods that we're using to create Neighborhood Planning Initiative. And this graphic represents the standardized process. It's a 7-step process. There's a minimum and a maximum timeline for each step. If you add them up together, the fastest we think we could do one of these is 18 months, and on the longer side, closer to 24 months. So that's the overview. Now we'll get into a little bit more detail on the schedule and next steps for specific projects. So on this map is shown every planning phase of NPI that's been announced so far. So in the first phase, shaded in the bluish color, there was far northeast, east central, and east. That's what we've been working on for the past couple of years, since 2017. Far northeast was adopted in June. And we've since then launched the West Plan. Public kickoff for that was in early October, following under our model of the rolling process of launching plans as others are completed. So, the other two Phase 1 plans for East Central and East are still in process. And we're looking to wrap those up in the months ahead. Once we finish those, we'll launch the other two plans for Phase 2 of NPI, which is for near Northwest and near Southeast. And we came to Ludi about this time last year with our statistical analysis to identify what we do after that, Phase 3. And the areas that were identified in that analysis are the ones highlighted here in pink. So the idea is that people know not just what we're working on, but what we're working on next, and then what we'll be starting after that. So this is several years of the future in terms of neighborhood planning work that we'll be undertaking. And this series shows the impact of that work. So before we started NPI a couple of years ago, about 19% of the city was covered by neighborhood and small area plans. After we finish Phase 1, the number climbs up to close to 40%. After we finish Phase 2, a few years from now, closer to 50%.
Volume set to 40%.
And then further down the line after Phase 3, we start getting close to 70%. So even with NPI only going about halfway through, up through Phase 3, we'll have covered a significant percentage of the city at close to 70%. So for our current projects, what are the next steps for each of those, the ones that are currently underway, East Central, East, and West? Well, for East Central, there's a public meeting, open house tomorrow night at East High School at 6 p.m. And the draft plan is available and online now for public review. So the open house will be an opportunity to see the draft recommendations, provide comments and input on that, can continue to do that with the online survey for a couple of months. It'll be open up throughout the entire holiday season and into early January. And then we'll take all the feedback, look at what we have, and look at any plan revisions that might be needed. That would be January and February. Final steering committee review of the updated plan draft would be expected in February, and then following that, we could begin the adoption process, which under the schedule would be March, April. For East, there was a community workshop that was scheduled a couple of weeks ago. The 3-day Halloween snowstorm got in the way of that, and so that meeting was rescheduled for later this month on November 23rd. That planning process, we had decided to slow down a little bit due to some of the recommendations needing a little bit more time and input from the public. And so rather than getting to a planned draft like East Central, instead the East Public Meeting is focused more on height and density recommendations and collecting additional input on that. So that survey will be open through mid-December following the public meeting. Then we'll look at what we have and take into account any revisions that are needed in December and January. We would expect to have a draft plan on a February-March timeline for the public to review, provide additional comments and revisions on. And so the adoption process for this plan on the timeline that it's on now is going to be later in the spring, probably more on a May timeframe. And then for West, I mentioned earlier that we had just kicked off that meeting in early October, or that planning process in early October. The next community workshop, we've saved the date but don't have other meeting details yet. January 14th is when we're expecting to have that community workshop number 2 for that planning process. The West plan will be in process throughout the entirety of 2020 with an anticipated completion in the first half of the following year. All right, now the final portion of the presentation is just highlighting some lessons learned and some ideas for how we can improve in future phases of NPI. So we have 4 categories of ideas here. The first is to rethink that standardized timeline. The 18 to 24-month planning process, we have the steps prescribed in the strategic plan for NPI. It does work. We followed that process for the Far Northeast plan that was adopted earlier this summer. But we think that there's some opportunities to improve it. So if we shorten some of the initial phases, the existing conditions and visioning phases, did that a little more efficiently and saved a little bit of time there, there'd be an opportunity to lengthen some of the later phases of the planning process when you get into options and alternatives and the plan draft. And if we were able to draft the plan sooner, we could have a longer public review phase and more opportunities for back and forth communication with the public in making refinements to the draft. I think that for East and East Central, we're seeing that would be beneficial. I think it would have been beneficial for Far Northeast as well. It's just a process improvement that we could make moving forward that will, I think, help us in the long run. Stick within the 2-year timeline moving forward, but have more opportunity for back and forth communication once you have a draft out and the content is known. Second, community engagement. We have a couple of slides on this topic, but we recognize that there's an opportunity to increase public awareness of the planning process in general. It is very common within any sort of planning process to get through most of it, and then once the draft is out, people say, "Wait, what was this? I hadn't heard about this before." And there's a large group of people who are starting to engage late in the process. So we do all these things already, but doing more of them to increase more awareness up front and increase participation throughout would be helpful for the process. So really an all of the above type strategy for increasing awareness, social media, flyering, postcards, news media coverage, all of the above. We could also take a look at how we approach the plan, the consultant scope of work, and direct more resources to support community engagement. This would be in addition to the subject matter expertise that consultant teams also provide, as well as our own in-house teams within community planning and development. We have improved our online resources quite a bit, but there's always opportunity to continue to improve that as well. These are things like the project website, use of videos, online surveys, a lot of things that we're doing already, but again, can continue to do better. And then just generally meeting people where they are, reaching out to new community members, being flexible in the approach, doing what works, listening to people, and following up. It's just sort of a general approach. Second slide on community engagement is to really reiterate that our goal is to reach as wide of a range of voices as possible and incorporate the input from all of those people. In order to know how good of a job we're doing at that, though, we need to improve our data collection for all of the outreach that we're doing. Our practice right now is if you come to a public meeting, when you sign in, give us your email address, there will also be a sheet of paper that you can fill out with some basic demographic information. We have that on our online surveys as well. That's how we know, race, general income levels, ethnicities of people who are attending our meetings. But there's a lot of outreach that's done where we don't collect that information. If we go to an R&O meeting, are on the agenda for some organization that invited us to speak, any of those types of engagement, more targeted engagement activities, we don't have that survey in hand, and really it kind of ends up on our outreach statistics as a tally mark of we went to, say, 50 plus community meetings. But it doesn't end up getting funneled into the same bucket of information that we have for our online surveys as well as our public meetings. And so finding ways to collect more of that data will help us do a better job of gauging the impact of the outreach that we're already doing, but we don't have the data to support. So once you do all of that and you have better data, there's an opportunity then to see how you're doing mid-process and adjust your approach if needed. And so these targeted outreach strategies for folks who aren't participating in the planning process in representative numbers, we could come up with strategies mid-process if needed, make adjustments to help reach those populations. So that's the final bullet there. Assess throughout the planning process and then adjust the approach as needed. So those are all things that we think we can improve moving forward with regards to community engagement. The third one is the steering committee's role in the process. Now, the steering committee is a group that we form with a lot of partnership with the city council offices for the plan area in identifying folks to be on the steering committee, who's a member, and they meet every month as part of throughout the entire planning process. So in a 2-year process, they'll meet 20 plus times, and they really engage at a detailed level. And also, most steering committee members represent some larger group of folks. So maybe a neighborhood organization or business organization or what have you. So they have quite a bit of reach themselves, typically as members. So we're thinking we could revise our process to increase the steering committee's role in developing customized engagement strategies for each plan up front as one of the first activities that the steering committee engages in. Talk about the outreach strategy for the specific area and identify strategies that they advise as being more effective for this particular part of the city. And then another refinement would be to consider adding a planning board member in an ex officio type role to each steering committee, again to create a stronger connection between the folks who will be providing a recommendation on the plan to City Council and then their more detailed awareness of how the process went. All right, and then finally wrapping up, a fourth area where we have some ideas would be on the topic of alignment with citywide plans. And we think we need a stronger emphasis early on in the planning process on a few things. One is existing citywide goals and policies, the big picture. This is especially relevant right now that we now have a new comprehensive plan and a new Blueprint Denver that are setting fresh policy citywide, and that these are policies that it falls upon neighborhood plans to support and to figure out how to achieve. And so making sure that that's known up front and that we do have citywide goals that need to be advanced even by our neighborhood plans. And that means that there are some parameters for small area plans within that framework. And then also doing more to increase awareness of the unique roles and responsibilities of small area plans in terms of what they can update, how they fit into the system. Also, the recommendations for catalytic projects or other types of infrastructure recommendations that tend to first come about within a small area plan as opposed to other types of plans. And that's what we had for you today.
Welcome, thank you. And so for some of my colleagues, I see some of the teams who are doing some of the other plans are in the audience as well, as you may have particular questions for the ones that are currently going on. I've got Council Members Black, Cde Baca, and Sawyer, and if I missed anyone else, please let me know. Councilwoman Black, you're up.
Thank you. Hi, Caryn. I know she knows what I'm going to ask, but
My apologies. And I want to welcome Council Members Kashmann and Sandoval to the table. My apologies.
I'm going to surprise you and ask some other questions first.
Nice.
So the East Central and the East plans are significantly behind schedule. And so, I mean, they were supposed to be done in 2019. And so is that going to impact the start of the one that is partially in my district, the near Southeast plan, which is mostly in Paul Cashman's district, but
Short answer would be yes. We don't want to start the next phase until we've completed. It'll still be staggered rollouts, but like we're starting west because far northeast finished. So between east and east central, we'll start the next two phases or the next two areas once those are complete.
okay, so the plan was to start the near Southeast plan this summer. And so based on the timeline you have on here, that's still realistic?
Is that the?
Yeah, that's our update with the schedule delays for the plans that are in process. That's when we think we'd be able to kick it off.
So knowing all of those lessons that you've learned, do you think you'll be able to do all of the forthcoming ones in a more timely fashion, or do you expect that there will be delays with those also?
I feel the process improvements that Cortland laid out will go a long way towards shoring up any concerns around delays at the back end of the process. One of the major factors that caused delay with East and East Central, just to begin, is we had a federal grant. So it got tied up in a lot of paperwork just to even get access to the funding to then be able to officially start the process. So far, because you all have been very generous to fund NPI on an annual basis, that will also improve the challenges we've had in delays, because now we know we have an annual pot of money to fund and contract that's within our control and our process, which is more expedited than trying to work with the Regional Transportation District as a pass-through funding source with the federal government. We won't necessarily have that in the future. So those two main improvements will go a long way towards getting us back on a more efficient schedule.
Okay, that's good to hear. And Cortland, I have been meaning to reach out to you to tell you this, that Caryn already knows, because I tell her every time I see her, that the Near Southeast plan needs to include the Evans corridor to Colorado Boulevard. That little section is not included in it, and it includes the Colorado Light Rail Station and that University Hills North neighborhood. And so we can talk more about that, but Paul Kashmann and I feel very strongly about that.
What she said.
And Sarah is listening as well, as the manager of the program too. So between Sarah and Cortland,
Okay, we'll
be
talk,
sure to keep
Sarah.
a close eye on
Welcome.
that. We agree. We agree. It's an important thing to group together, and we are willing to make some adjustments to the budget or to the boundaries as we get into the conversation if there's a real compelling circumstance. And that's one of them.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Sabak.
Thank you. A couple questions, but you mentioned something that I'd like some more information on. What were the parameters of the federal grant? What was exactly in that package? What was it designed to do?
So we will give you a much more detailed overview offline and give you a good summary, but essentially the goal of the funding was to advance some improvements to policy along an enhanced transit corridor. So the focus is Colfax as a bus rapid transit route, and so the idea was to focus in on what policy improvements needed to be made along the corridor in order to ensure that the BRT is successful, in addition to just assessing the policies and investments that we already have in place. So there was a main part to that focused on just updates to policies. So a portion of that is going towards the planning effort to just re-engage the community in the vision along the corridor. Then there's a segment of the funding that advances some of the implementation ideas that will come from the neighborhood planning conversation. So it could be a further study of an infrastructure piece. It could be more design standard work. It could be a couple other things. And we can get you a more detailed overview of that scope, but that's the intention behind it, is to not only update policies, but then also to advance some of the implementation.
So which came first, the grant and then the NPI?
So, yeah, good
NPI
question.
and grant?
So we had the NPI program we had the organization and the strategic plan of the program in place. We started to get some seed money. At the same time, we were awarded the FTE grant that was going to focus on Colfax as a separate project. But what we decided to do was take that federal grant and fold it into the NPI process. And that's why we did East and East Central at the same time, because we wanted to leverage that federal grant opportunity. So timing just synced up really well.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm not quite understanding what the intended outcomes are of the neighborhood plans. I get they're designed to start a conversation, guide growth, but your neighborhood plans that you have completed follow the pattern of the inverted L. And so that would suggest that maybe you started to address some of the issues, the inequities along the inverted L. We're not seeing that And so I'm wondering, like, what is the intended outcome of these neighborhood plans?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I feel that it's more than just for me to answer. Really, it's for the community to answer. It's for you as leaders of those communities to help answer. What we're learning from the community in this process is an important outcome is an opportunity for neighbors to come together and get to know each other and work towards a common vision. That's continues to be an important outcome of our planning efforts. It also has helped us to inform where we've had misalignment between regulations that have been in place for a long time that are yielding unintended consequences that the community is not happy about. We can identify those problems and dive into those more detailed. That's two things. Do you want to?
Can you identify those? Like what? Yeah. So it seems like the inverted L, the inequities are deepening, and the deepening of inequity is aligned perfectly with the neighborhood plans. And so as the neighborhood plans happen, the more vulnerable those neighborhoods become. And so what have you guys teased out to be the problems?
So you're citing a really important thing that we're learning, right? Is we want to understand what role does planning have in the inverted L, and what can we do to use the planning process to help mitigate those problems? You're asking the right question, but because we're also new to that conversation, we're not ready to say, oh, we did this plan in this area and it solved the issues. But what we're willing to do is to lean into that and say, okay, as part of this neighborhood planning conversation, we want to learn from the community and dive into the data a little bit here. What specifically is causing the issues in that particular area, and how can we use the planning process to identify those strategies? So we're in a very new stage. So in many ways, you all are in a great position to help inform what that looks like and what are the right tools to solve those challenges and reduce the risk of the displacement that may occur because of planning. But it certainly isn't don't do planning. I mean, we have benefited as a community from those organized conversations for years. So I think it's really just about what are the new tools we need to bring to the conversation to do better planning for our neighborhoods. And part of that is better engagement so that we hear more voices, but some of that is working with partners that can implement tools and resources and programs that CPD cannot. OED, now it's DDO, HOST, they're amazing partners in that conversation to say, what tools can we bring to the table to help this neighborhood? And we're strengthening those partnerships as we go along. So you'll see it's not CPD's plans, it's the city's plans with all of the partners at the table to help tackle those problems and avoid those issues.
That's a good segue. The community engagement slide didn't, it was very aspirational. And so at this point, we're in the middle of a couple of plans and getting ready to do more. I am looking more for the detail of how you will achieve those aspirational goals of community engagement. What does better community engagement look like? What does an understanding of statistically valid data look like? Yeah. How are you guys measuring relevant input? You know, if you have less than a percentage point of the population giving their input, that's not relevant input, right? Mm-hmm. It's not representative. Mm-hmm. If you're not seeking statistically valid data, you're not really engaging people at a level that makes sense to inform a neighborhood plan. So what are some of the strategies to do community engagement better?
That's great. Do you want to maybe dive a little deeper into some of those examples? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is that we don't have all of the data that accurately captures what we're already doing. I think that's an issue because there is a lot of outreach engagement. There's a lot of late nights and Saturday mornings out in the community on the part of staff, and we're not documenting the reach of all of that work. So I think that where we do have data, it tends to come from our online surveys and from our public meetings, and not all the rest of everything that the staff is doing to help reach the community. So I think step one is getting better data to help track those activities so that they're at least included into the mix. And then we're already doing much of what the strategies would be, moving forward. I don't know that there's anything that's totally new that isn't being done, but it's getting better and more sophisticated. We always learn from the outreach that we've done from the past and improve it for the next round. And so more of what's working, I think, is the other strategy, and then maybe considering some things that we haven't done before, usually because they cost more money, but they might be worthwhile. With the East Planning area, we did a postcard mailing a few months ago that went out to all the mailing addresses. Now, a lot of those might end up in the recycling bin, but it is a way to try to reach every person that's in an area. And that's not something that we've done as a standard procedure as part of plans, but something that we could look at reserving budget for to do in the future.
I like the postcards. How are you validating the assertion that your strategies are improving? Like, what's the feedback loop?
Well, do you have a?
I don't have a good answer because it's such a great question. It is. I mean, we're open to input about how do we best do that.
Yeah.
We can continue to monitor the data that we are collecting over time to see where the needle is moving. But I think there's going to be some more qualitative outcomes that help us know, hearing from more folks. It's hearing folks talk about the plan and embrace it and show the ownership of the planning efforts from different communities. There's a lot of different ways we can measure that.
Yeah, it's a qualitative answer from me, but I've worked for CPD for more than 10 years, and 10 years ago, there's so much that we weren't doing that we're always doing now, right? So having childcare and Spanish interpretation at public meetings, translating materials into different languages, not just English. Having the online surveys at all a few years ago was maybe you'd have it for a project or something. It wasn't a standard thing like it is now, where following the public meeting, we have an online equivalent of a survey that's gauged to get that same kind of input on the same questions, putting the same information in front of folks who actually showed up at the public meeting. Now you have an opportunity to do that for a month following a public meeting. These are all process improvements that are standard practice for us now that weren't a part of the picture even a few years ago for many of them. So I think that's how we're getting better.
Thank you for that. I strongly encourage you guys getting somebody who can partner with you to talk about statistically valid data and how do you conduct sampling that makes data valid. I think that's really important and pretty easy to do. They're at UCD. They've got a study of the built environment going on, people who would be happy to partner to do this. Also, does a neighborhood need your participation, CPD's participation, to change their neighborhood plans?
Certainly is of benefit to them to have CPD helping with the process, because ultimately if the plan is to have meaning in the world of the city in terms of implementation and advancing the next steps, we want that to be a city council, a planning board and city council approved plan. So in order to be successful in that process, CPD is an important leader in that discussion. We certainly have charter responsibilities over the comprehensive plan, and certainly feel that we have certain responsibilities per the charter to also oversee planning. So, that's something that we're very proud of in our role in that conversation. So we would want to continue to keep that relationship.
So what would happen if a neighborhood pulled together a substantial sample of the neighborhood and made their own plan and then came to you guys for approval? Would you guys consider
So we don't
that?
approve it at all. So we don't have an approval role.
Will you guys to advance it to us?
Yeah, I mean, of course, if somebody brings something forward, it's kind of an odd question because it's never happened before, so we don't
In Denver,
know.
but it has other places.
Oh, sure, yes,
Yeah.
of course, but in Denver's world. So sure, if we were going about our business and someone approached us and said, we have a draft plan, we would want to take the time to review it and analyze it and ask a lot of questions to see if it's really prepared. We want to give our advice about whether it's successful. I would, then I imagine it can go through Planning Board and City Council for adoption, but this is where I would veer into maybe a question for attorneys because of our charter responsibility. So it's not one that I can completely answer for you, but I can definitely confirm a few of those things with the attorneys because I wouldn't want to veer from our charter responsibilities.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sawyer, Sandoval, Kashmann, and then Black.
Thank you. Thank you. And actually, just so you know, we have a situation happening in the East where that's going on right now. And so if you talk to the attorneys, they have some answers for you on that. So,
Good.
I heard about it.
yeah, I bet you did. And I just wanted to say thank you very much sorry about my voice, for the work that you guys have done in terms of bettering your outreach and your process improvements. When I came into office in July and came to especially Kurt and Liz and Evelyn and said, we've got to slow this down and really work to better engage the community. I think they panicked a little bit, but I really appreciate all that you have done to really change the conversation and re-engage the community in a better way, because I think the new draft that has just recently been released of the East Plan in particular, the conversation has changed dramatically. Sorry. And is really in a valuable way. So thank you very much for that. But my question is really around a couple of different things. So first of all, in terms of the steering committee, is there a way that you can formalize the process a little better to identify what areas of a community or something like that you would want council members to pull from? I feel like it's very difficult to get a broad enough swath of community members, and coming into the process late, our steering committee clearly is not representative of the community as a whole. And so if there was a way to maybe come up with a formalized, better process of identifying what groups should be represented on the steering committee, that might be super helpful for us as council members to be able to better put together a steering committee. That just might be another process improvement that would be helpful. And then in terms of the feedback sessions and community sessions, do you have a plan in place for how to engage community members who live in the community in a different way from advocacy groups who are attending these sessions for their own specific purposes and outcomes? Because I know in the East area, we have a major problem with, for example, advocacy groups attending these meetings and speaking and filling out the forms online and skewing the data specifically to to extend their purposes, and leaving out or undermining the representative voices of the people who actually live in the communities. And so do you have a plan for that?
I wouldn't say we have a specific plan, but the way that number one, the role of advocacy groups do have an important voice in any planning conversation. They can help us think big picture about the potential for a community. I don't generally think that the advocacy groups that we work for are necessarily trying to be manipulative in the process. They really are trying to be helpful to advance citywide goals.
I totally disagree with you.
That's fair. You don't have to agree. But generally, I think the way that we help to sort of amplify the community voice over more of the advocacy groups is through all of the different ways that we're engaging the community. So sure, there's an online survey that is it's more anonymous and others can get on, but through our attendance at neighborhood events, attending neighborhood meetings on the regular schedules, really doing more breakout sessions where we know who our conversations are with, office hours within those communities. Those are all the ways that we can kind of balance that voice out to make sure that we're, number one, reaching more folks in the community, but also making sure that we truly are hearing from folks that live in the community to balance out what we may be hearing from the citywide voices. So that's really our best technique, is a lot of that more personal, like as Cortland was describing, meet them where they are. That's how we're going to talk to the people and really hear the voice of the community members.
Okay. And then in terms of the actual statistical neighborhoods themselves, the voices amongst the statistical neighborhoods are also very different depending on the statistical neighborhoods that you are talking to. And the needs of those communities are very different. And because traditionally the neighborhood plans have been neighborhood specific, so I am thinking of in the East Area Plan in our experience, and I'm speaking for Councilman Herndon here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, the voices on East Colfax neighborhood and the needs of that community and the voices in the Hale community are very, very different, right? They have different needs, they have different desires, and they are in a totally different set in a totally different area, right? It's divided by 3 miles, but they're in the same neighborhood plan. They just happen to both be along East Colfax, one along Colorado Boulevard and one along Yosemite. So how do you balance, or how, like, do you have a plan in place for how you're balancing those different voices? Because I know you don't want to necessarily customize the plan to the specific needs of specific neighborhoods, but I don't see how you could possibly come up with a plan that's one size fits all for 4 different or 6 different neighborhoods that are so very different, have such very different needs.
Mm-hmm.
So my answer to that is that with the structure of how an NPI plan is organized is that it's at varying scales. So one of those scales is the entire study area, and there are, you know, recommendations that apply at that framework level for the entire study area as a whole. But there's also a chapter for each individual neighborhood, and that's an opportunity to identify strategies and recommendations if they truly are specific to a neighborhood and don't apply to the other neighborhoods. Then they go in the neighborhood chapter. And then there's another geographic level of, you know, other important areas. So it could be, you know, a station area or Colfax itself, some other geographic scale where you can dive into that level too, even smaller than a neighborhood, and say, here's recommendations that apply just to this, you know, focus area. So I think as a general approach, it works pretty well, but it doesn't mean that, you know, that there aren't like disagreements on what the appropriate direction is as a whole that could still apply, you know, to the entire planning area. But it does create that release valve for, you know, where there really is a different direction and a truly different vision. It can be captured in the neighborhood chapter.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's an important thing. I think it's something we continue to try to do our best with. When we made the decision to start to group neighborhoods together, the goal, you know, part of that benefit was so that neighborhoods could share conversations that have shared issues or a shared corridor or something along that lines. But you're right, sometimes they don't have shared issues and they need, so we want to give space in that process for those opportunities and then a physical space for it in the document. But it was part of where we had to help balance all of the needs. And there was a huge demand and huge need for updating the neighborhood plans across the city. And if we did a custom, we did the data, and if we did a customized plan that was very unique to every neighborhood, which we would love to do, because that's what we do, we love that, it would take us, you know, almost 80 years to get across the city. So it was a bit of a trade-off, but we think we're working on that right balance, and I'll bet there'll be more lessons learned as we get through the more phases about how best to struggle with and create the opportunities with grouping neighborhoods together in such larger areas that we're not as accustomed to.
Well,
Yeah,
again,
it's
I
good
just want to
insight.
say thank you for your willingness to change the conversation halfway through the beginning of, the first three of these and do a lot of things differently and be willing to talk about the lessons learned, because I think you could have just dug your heels in and you didn't. And so thank you very
That
much for
wouldn't be
that.
our style.
Thank you.
All right, wow, this queue's getting long. Sandoval, Kashmann, Black Cde Baca.
Thank you. So I have a couple questions. Thank you for presenting today. We've been anticipating this for a long time. So I have a question to talk about more on the front end. So as we know, Northwest Denver, Traffy Park, Sunnyside, Highland, and Jefferson Park are the next in the queue, right? And it will be the first time that a neighborhood plan is solely in one council district. Normally, these have overlapped into different areas. So in my area, we've been talking about this since the NPI even started kicking off. So I'm wondering if you could help or come up with different ideas where we know these are coming down the queue and the process has slowed due to the fact of these two plans that need more time to process out what they're doing. How can you support the next phases by creating some type of toolkit so that you can get ready, so that the council member can actually go into those areas and start talking, what does the stakeholder process look like? Who should be on there? What type of commitment is it? When you're on that, when you're a stakeholder and you're on that, what type of commitment is it? Do you have to sign a document? Are you allowed to go on social media and blast anyone who doesn't agree with you? Because a lot of times those are the issues that when you get down further along that you come into. But if you do a lot of the back work and you can prepare a neighborhood more on the front end, I think that you might actually find that your processes that you're talking about slowing down and getting different type of engagement will actually come easier, because these neighborhoods, they're not prepared. No planners coming in there talking to them about that beforehand. It's suddenly there's this big kickoff meeting and suddenly people are expected to know what to happen. So I've been talking about in my neighborhood creating a neighborhood group like leaders. Can we get some infrastructure set up so people can already start signing up online to get details? So I would love to work with CPD to talk about creating a toolkit and using District 1, then I can't remember, whatever, Northeast, sorry, I'm not feeling well, Northeast, Northwest, whatever. Those 4 neighborhoods are the next in the queue. And because I have a planner in my office, it's not going to require as much time and commitment on your end. We can actually leverage my office to help us somewhat see about a toolkit, so that you can start implementing these to like Paul Kashmann and Kendra Black. So if it worked, you actually have a way to go into that neighborhood pregame. I just think you're going to get better outcomes the more people are prepared and the more dialogue you're having on the front end. So that was my question and ask receivable from you on that. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, Cortland, that you came back this time last year. You were here this time last year.
Yeah.
So are you taking the data that you created to put these into the queue? Are you updating that data yearly? Because as rezonings take place, as the GeoBond got implemented, right? The GeoBond projects have come through now. Have you updated that data yearly, and are you sure that these are in the gray area? If you go to that slide in the gray area that you don't know what next, are you sure that you're on the correct trajectory?
Yeah, so the data, it's not updated every year, but we rerun the analysis with fresh data each time that we do it. And when we do it is when we are getting, deep into a planning phase and starting to think about the future ones, rerun it. So that's why we were here last year, use the most current data available. And yeah, I think that there's 15 pieces of data in that analysis. Some of them we'll have to rethink the indicators because they were based on the old Blueprint Denver, like areas of change and areas of stability was one of them. New Blueprint doesn't have that system. So in addition to fresh data, there's an opportunity to look at the indicators themselves and see, what should it be. There's a few of them where we'll have no choice because it's a different system now that's in place. But I think each time we do it, an opportunity to say, like, is this giving us, results that make sense?
Yeah, so thank you. I would just like to push CPD to actually to incorporate our new plans, because if you're using the same data that from last time and you haven't incorporated the fact that we have a new comp plan and new blueprint Denver, we're not on the same trajectory as the plans that we're basing all our rezonings and everything else on. So what I'm hoping that with CPD does is we start getting more succinct. We start actually following the document and we start actually going from a high level. So if we have Blueprint Denver that's adopted and we have a new comp plan that's adopted, but we haven't updated the data for the neighborhood planning initiatives, I don't think it doesn't seem to be succinct, and it doesn't seem to be equitable. And I really
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't overly concerned around that disconnect, because there's really two data points that I think, and stop me if I'm wrong, but one is the area of change and area of stability, where it's although it's a different system or different terminology, we can still do a really easy one-for-one. And so I don't think it's that particular translation.
I don't think it's that particular translation. Yeah. I think it's more of the overarching, when you open up Blueprint Denver, we have goals for the city.
Right.
And I don't think that we are incorporating these goals. There's no possible way, when we have an old 2002 Blueprint Denver in the NPI in this trajectory, that they're aligned with equity and the other type of sustainability that we're talking about in these plans. So I'm not talking about just the areas of change and stability. I'm talking about the more overarching, when you open that document, there's these high level goals that we at City Council keep talking about, and we feel a little handcuffed on because all of our documents are not following each other. And so I would just really push that every time we have the opportunity to input new data, input new equity, input new sustainability goals, that we're just doing that. And it's just a suggestion, because like you, Cortland, I've been here since 2012 and I've seen the change in this, and so we just need to push harder. So that would be my suggestion for that. So on the planning board member, you mentioned maybe having a planning board member, which I think is a great idea. They bring a different type of expertise into the situation. Would they be able to vote on it though, once it gets to that? Because I've been in the room where I've had a planning board member at a really robust discussion for a rezoning, and then they've had to recuse themselves. So I'd hate for a planning board member to be part of the process and then not be able to opine and have to recuse themselves. So can you talk to me about that process?
Yeah, so that's still, it's an idea right now. We'll be talking to planning board about that idea next week to see if that's something that they want to pursue or not. It could be that those concerns, might be a reason why we wouldn't want to implement that change. But I think that we could probably figure out a way around the challenges. I think that, if they weren't a full member of the committee and were more observing the committee on behalf of planning board, participating in discussions but not trying to influence the group per se, I don't know. There might be some parameters we can put in place that would alleviate the concerns so that we could get the benefits of having their participation.
Perfect, thank you. I think that's a really good idea. I've personally used planning board members when I've gotten into sticky situations, because they are they know past issues that have come up that I may not have known about in other council districts, and how they come to play out, and best practices. And a lot of them are think tanks on different, like forethought leaders on other areas in their professional life. So I love to leverage how smart people are to get the better outcomes for my district. So I'm always thinking about that. And one other thing about the steering committee, I mentioned it to Eugene in the West Area Plan. I would really like to see some type of like one-page document that actually outlines what that person's role is, and the type of kind of like how we have commissioners right? We have commissioners, and they have a role, and they have a responsibility, and they actually, I don't know if they sign something. I think Councilman Torres would be probably better equipped to answer that question, but hold them accountable to what they are doing, because a lot of times what we have is these steering members are part of your local represent, like your registered neighborhood organization, right? And a lot of those people are already really involved. And what I hear Candi Cde Baca saying is we need to peel back the onion a little bit. And so when we have these people who are already really involved in their neighborhood, and they're speaking on behalf of the thousands of people who live in their neighborhood, the voices don't always align. And so we need to make sure that what they're representing is actually the true and authentic representation of their neighborhood, which is challenging. I don't think that there's a solution out there. I'm trying to get different type of involvement in my own neighborhood, and that's why I'm talking about this toolkit, or this possibility of going in on the front end to get different, so that we're not just relying on my registered neighborhood organization, because they already know. They already get information from you all. I want to take it back and go like 3 steps, layers different into that neighborhood. And what does that look like? And if we have a steering committee member who is just, it's all about them, and it's all about their thought process instead of about we and the people, that's when I get concerned. And if you don't have a way to have them sign some type of document, there's no way as a council person when these issues come up for me to address it and say, I need to have you step down, and I need to appoint someone else because you are hindering the process moving forward. So I've seen that happen in Globeville and Swansea when this wasn't so codified, right? When it was more of the old neighborhood plans. We saw those obstructionists go in there, and there was no way for us to make sure that we could reappoint someone else to get someone who was new at the table in their place. So those are just some suggestions I have, and thank you.
That's really helpful, thank you.
Councilwoman, so
Yep.
as I've done 66% of the current small neighborhood plans. There's nothing that's preventing a council member tomorrow from removing someone from the steering committee. So this is a volunteer effort, and you can, Councilwoman Sawyer has added someone to the steering committee. So you have that responsibility. You have that, once that comes, there's nothing tomorrow. You could say, hey, this isn't the group's fitting. Hey, this isn't representative, and I'm going to take one person off, put someone on. There's someone to do that. And I do want to point out, because you asked, the first meeting, I think both far northeast and east, they go over steering committees. These are what your responsibilities are. And it's been a good amount of time having those conversations. So I don't believe that there should be any questions from steering committee members about what's expected of them, because I've seen it in 2 now of these area plans where they've covered those in depth at the first meeting, so there's no misunderstanding. Councilman Kashmann, Black, and Cde Baca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So once again, to underscore what Councilman Black had to say about Evans, I was heartened to hear your explanation of the grant placing Colfax at the center of that discussion. I think it's a similar dynamic in our part of the world. And I also wanted to add a me too to Councilwoman Sandoval's discussion about a starter kit, because our neighborhoods are all hearing about this stuff and they're chomping at the bit. And I think it would definitely be helpful to help keep that enthusiasm alive and get people ready. So anything you can do in that way would be greatly appreciated. The one thing in near Southeast, Virginia Village is geographically an enormous neighborhood, okay? And there's at least 2 completely different housing stocks and styles to the neighborhood. Once you get across Monaco, it becomes suburban, and even southern reaches of the neighborhood west of there have a more suburban flavor. So do you have sub-chapters in your neighborhood chapter? Have you had that come about in the plans you're doing now?
Different housing patterns and styles?
Really, they could easily be. Cook Park could easily be its own statistical neighborhood as far as differences and geographical barriers, et cetera. So I'm just wondering what you've experienced thus far.
Yeah, so the tools that we have from the new Blueprint Denver are things like neighborhood context, as well as future places. And so in combination, these things together can help to capture those distinctions. So a lot of times, there'd be a difference between maybe on one side of the street, the neighborhoods all have alleys, and then starting at the street, they don't on the other side, something like that. It represents a change of context more from an urban neighborhood to an urban edge neighborhood, and those kinds of things are captured in the system, as well as different types of land uses that are captured in the place types. So between the two, we can get at what the guidance is. But then also in the neighborhood chapter is an opportunity to talk about urban design, which may not be captured by things like land use and lot size and things like that only. And so there is an urban design section of the plan, and within any, you could establish character areas or whatever, you needed to in the neighborhood chapter to capture those things.
Sure. And this is just popped into my mind. How long ago were our statistical neighborhoods created? And is there any thought, or this is not a suggestion, it's just in my mind, is there a reason to rethink our statistical neighborhoods? Has that come up at all?
It comes up a few times. I believe the statistical neighborhoods were established in the 70s as a way to have some consistent reporting on the census data that's collected. And other avenues now, a lot of data sources use the census tracts and blocks and statistical neighborhoods. So for consistency of tracking data over time, it has served us very well, and we'd be nervous about changing boundaries.
Sure.
But it comes up now and again about names of the neighborhoods, which they just assign names at the time they established them. So we'll continue to honor the statistical neighborhood boundaries because of the benefit it brings to
consistency.
For that. But it's a fair question.
No, that makes good sense. The last thing I wanted to mention, Councilman Cde Baca brought up, early on, what is the purpose of these plans? And I assume one of the main reasons is this is the ground level implementation of our guiding documents, right? Blueprint Denver and the comp plan. So while that may not be the only goal of it, I assume that is part of the charge. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because the whole point being, the questions that the Councilwoman was asking are difficult questions, because in the past, we've looked at our plans and it's like, well, is the shape of the building right? Is the height of the building right? Is the use in the building right? It's been those type of discussions. But now when we look at our major plans, at the top of the list, our charge is equity. And so we're just now developing these tools.
That's right.
And I spent some time last week in Atlanta at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. And it is staggering how recent these discussions are at a national level. And so now we're finally taking them center stage in our own city. And this is the turning point. We just happen to be the people here at the turning point where these are fortunately taking a major role in these NPI discussions. So
very well said.
I appreciate you all wrestling with them.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you joining us in that wrestling match.
well-
We need all the support and partnership we can get in this time of transition. It's well said.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Hi, colleagues. We got about 20 minutes left. I'm confident we'll get through everyone. I just want to give you that time hack. I'm going to allow Councilwoman Torres, because we're now going to people who already spoke first. So Councilwoman Torres, you're up.
Sure, thank you. wanted to ask a couple questions, just so I'm understanding kind of how neighborhoods became high priority, low priority for a planning need, because I'm seeing some that are indicated as low priority or low planning need that don't even have a neighborhood plan, and whether the absence of a plan is indicative of something, because most of the neighborhoods in District 3 are in a high planning need kind of scope, either second or top, and wondering how much you're overlaying, I think the indicators that you have, like high poverty level, cost burden, median income, to high planning need that then drives a bit of a density conversation. That are we looking at whether or not that exacerbates that particular issue of economics and how that's affecting a neighborhood? If we're just talking about planning independent of kind of economy, whether or not that's playing into any of the decisions at all. And I don't want to compare apples to oranges, but I look at Hilltop, which is very low planning need, very high income area, and my district, very low income, very high planning need area. Is that encouraging more to be done in my district than will ever be done in Hilltop?
It's a good point. I think the starting point for that is to look at our citywide plans, because that's where we've had the citywide conversation about generally where are we directing growth. And so we wouldn't invent new areas because they happen to be planning need. So as we're looking to the west area, our starting point is going to be, okay, based on Blueprint Denver, where did we say we were going to direct growth? Okay, along this corridor, in this little node. Okay, let's talk to the community about what that means in that context. So, the conversation is going to look exactly the same in every area. Our starting point is going to be, what does Blueprint say about where growth is directed? And then you talk about what should it look like? How do we mitigate the risk of displacement that may come from that investment? What are some other things that we have to challenge? And every planning area is going to have that conversation, whether it's Hilltop or Barnum. They all have to share that conversation based on, and again, the starting point is what Blueprint says about where growth and density should occur. If you're, still kind of getting all the details of Blueprint, it's a big document, but there's certainly areas where it's higher thresholds of growth, and then some areas that are lower thresholds of growth. But even our single-family neighborhoods, there's policies to talk about where do we find gentle density improvements in all of our single-family areas to help take on this citywide goal.
And if that's going to be the case, I think that's going to be an interesting conversation, because my single-family home areas are going to be more likely to shift than other single-family home areas throughout the city. And we can't be the only place where building is taking place, where development is taking place. So just want to make sure that I'm getting that across. The other piece is just encouragement to get some of the community engagement tools as you're doing plan by plan into an actual toolkit that people can see. So what is helping you access hard to reach communities? What are some of the tactics that can be used? Because I'm assuming teams will change from one area plan to the next, and it might be useful to start to get some of those strategies down on paper or in a document that folks can refer to. And one of those I would really emphasize, and this actually came from Councilwoman Sandoval's recommendation, for youth to be more of an engaged partner in helping develop these plans. They're going to be the ones who will actually see the end results of a lot of this work in 10, 15 years. And for them to be an incorporated voice more attentively in every single plan would be strongly encouraged. I'd love to see more of that, even kind of a smaller advisory group or component to the plan of what they want to see.
Great. Yep.
Thank you.
Good suggestion.
Good discussion. All right, colleagues, you got 15 minutes. I've got Black, Cde Baca.
I don't really have any more questions, but just a few follow-ups. If you compare page 9 of this to page 14, it shows that some of the parts of the city on 14 that don't look like they're a priority actually have newer existing plans. So it's not, I think this slide can be a little misleading. It looks like future phases is farther out to the future, but a lot of those future phases in the inverted L neighborhoods already have newer neighborhood plans. Just wanted to point that out. And also, we do have or you guys have a neighborhood toolkit on your website that is intended to be used in preparation for NPI. I have a neighborhood that is engaging with the toolkit and doing this sort of pre-planning homework. And as far as outreach goes, I have a record of like great attendance at my community meetings, and it's not by accident. I've gone door to door personally, and my team. I have mailed out of my own budget postcards to thousands, tens of thousands of people. I go to back to school nights. I go to teacher conferences because that's where younger people are at those meetings. I visit apartment buildings and senior homes, and I have a relationship with apartment managers to put flyers up in their lobbies and work hard to get articles in little local papers and, and then the typical ways too. But it is through a lot of work that we get higher attendance. It's not just I put it on my Facebook page and all of a sudden 300 people came up. So I know I've worked very closely with you guys on that, but I just wanted to point that out. What?
That works for me.
Good?
That's it.
All right, Councilman Cde Baca.
Quick comment building on the inverted L and Jamie's comment. A plan doesn't mean that we're doing equity. A plan means that we're directing growth to a certain place, and it's typically the most marginalized areas with the least political capital to fight back against the plans. And so our neighborhood plans actually preceded goals of equity. And so that's a problem, and I wish that we would have gone back to address those first before carrying on the roadshow without having figured out how we exacerbated the issues in these communities. A suggestion I have for outreach is connected to PocketGov. Is there any potential for you all to work with tech to figure out how we do data collection differently? When you guys show us participation numbers, it's not helpful because it's removed from its context. So we don't know if all of those people are advocacy group members and don't even live in the neighborhood. We don't know if they're directly affected or if they're in surrounding neighborhoods. And so Nextdoor, does this, and I don't love Nextdoor, but Nextdoor does this mapping where you can see the red houses who have not signed up, the green houses that have. And so when we're doing planning and we want to validate who's participating, it would be nice to know if the people who are most immediately affected by the plan contributed their input to the plan. So just a recommendation on that. And also DMVs, human services, rec centers, those are places that I think that we should be seeing opportunities for input rather than having to set up entire community meetings for these things. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other council members?
Oh, and also, why can't there be one plan that gets amended as you get the smaller components updated? Why do we have multiple plans? It feels like when somebody's justifying a rezone, it's pretty easy to say it's consistent with the plan because there's like 5 plans to pull from. Why don't we have a single document that we update every time there are changes? If it is blueprint, then when you get a neighborhood plan, you update, you amend it. Why don't we do that?
It's a great question, and it's definitely a challenge that we identified at the beginning of the Neighborhood Planning Initiative. One of our problem identification, we did some data on at that point to say we've got so many little tiny area plans, and they are overlapping boundaries, varying timeframes. So a challenge we were trying to tackle as part of the Neighborhood Planning Initiative is to have a more consistent approach to the boundaries of the planning. And as we go through the Neighborhood Planning Initiative, we would update and replace existing plans. So for example, with Far Northeast, there was a 61st NPI station area plan that we, I don't know the technical terms, did we repeal it? We officially repealed that plan and had it replaced with Far Northeast, along with the Gateway plan, some other plans on the books, so that it's very clear that there's one neighborhood plan to look for, but that will take us the entire length of the program to clean up. So we've talked about this before in your district. You have a lot of that circumstance where there's a lot of overlapping plans currently in place that we all have to sort of navigate together to figure out what is the collective story for that area. And so we hope to solve that through this program, but it'll just take some time to clean that up. In the meantime, we also have new updated blueprint policies and comp plan policies to help guide us in that. Because certainly if there was something that an old neighborhood plan had stated as a goal, but is in conflict with our equity goals, then we can kind of use it as a trump card and say, this is an equity, we've got an equity concern here that's more important than this specific neighborhood plan strategy that was from 10 years ago.
Can you guys add a slide to your rezoning recommendations that does that? Because
yeah.
I feel like there are often many contradictions amongst the plans, and there's never any intentionality to identify those when something's in front of us. And it would be nice to know, not just what piece of all 5 plans is consistent, but where is there conflict? And how are we deciding which one supersedes the rest?
Yep, that's absolutely helpful. Yep.
Thank you.
We can do that.
I want to take a couple of moments just to one. You cannot be any bolder when you're trying to put together this plan. Recognizing 78 statistical neighborhoods, some having none, some having when I was in high school, and I'm not that young, and to recognize that, hey, we're going to find a way to do this smartly. And oh, by the way, what you're doing is you're going into communities saying, your neighborhoods are going to change. How do you feel about that? So you're not even going in knowing that conflict is going to arise, because the one thing people fear is change. But we recognize as a city, growth is continuing to come, and how do we do it smartly? Working with community to be a part of that. And so you just cannot say thank you enough to the team. And we can certainly question, and I don't think question is the right word. I follow the logic for why you pick certain neighborhoods first based off growth and changes coming. And we can certainly, you only have a finite staff. That would have been great if we could have done more neighborhoods at once. But doing this, I think, has been very thoughtful. And the proof is in the pudding. So far, we've put one out. Far Northeast went very well. And that's a testament that what we are doing can be successful. East Central, I'm not familiar with, so I don't want to speak to that, but I can speak to East. There have been some concerns, but I appreciate, and Councilwoman Sawyer, I appreciate her saying that the city said, okay, let's figure out what we can do better and what's not working. And so I think that's a testament to the leadership team and, quite frankly, the troops on the ground. I mean, the ones who were there, who, in my opinion, frankly, some of the behavior that they've gotten from constituents has been disappointing, at least. For people who are trying to work with community to say, how can we serve you to help you with this? And the behavior that they've gotten, I actually think is disappointing. But I applaud us as a city, because even as we're having conversations about these plans, we're also doing things to help mitigate some of the challenges. And I'll just use East Colfax. PTs, 7,900, affordable housing coming on the north and south side, saying, hey, we recognize the changes, and these are some of the things we're doing in addition to these plans. So I'll be happy when these two are done, because I would like some more free time. I want to pass off the baton towards Sandoval, have fun with that. But thank you. And by the way, Caryn, thank you as well. My understanding is you're moving on to bigger and better things. But thank you so much for your leadership. And the conversation's not done, colleagues. If you wanted this back, if there's another conversation we want to have down the road about these neighborhood plans, I thought this was a great conversation. I'm glad we gave you the whole Ludi, because if we had another rezoning or something else, we wouldn't have been able to get to this level of depth. So sincerely, thank you all. And if there's nothing else, if you got issues with consent, let Zach know. If nothing else, we're adjourned.
Thank you.